Hi, Christina.
Hi, Stacy.
I need to fix my audio. I have headphones in, but it's going through my laptop instead.
Can you hear
Okay.
me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. I just wish I could hear you in my headphones instead. I always have to do this when I switch back over to WebEx from Teams.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll try that.
Hello there. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our home energy rebate discussion today. Starting a couple minutes late to give everybody a chance to join the chat and to log into the webinar. My name is Emily Salmeri. If you've joined us before, you've probably met myself and some of my colleagues that'll be joining me today. I am our federal grants officer here at the Oregon Department of Energy, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the home energy rebates that we're anticipating coming to the state of Oregon this year, hopefully. All right, next slide, please. So for today's agenda, what we'll do is we'll start with an introduction to the funding and where it comes from the federal government, a little bit about the rough timeline that we've been looking at, as well as some related programs that we have going on, not only here at Odo, but elsewhere in the state, and the Justice 40 initiative and how it relates to these programs. We'll do a high-level intro to the HERE program, as well as the HOMES program and how they relate to each other. And we'll give some time for some clarifying questions if anybody that has some that come up as we're speaking. And then what we'll do is we'll jump into the program design and implementation, some areas where we've had some ability to make some determinations as we've been going through our application. And then at the end, we'll have a little bit extra time, hopefully, for some guided questions that we have to ask of you all that are joining us today. Next slide, please. All right, and before we jump in, I know that many of you have joined us before and you've heard me probably say this or others say this, but this is just a quick introduction. If you don't know what the Oregon Department of Energy, or as you'll hear many of us say today, ODO is how we call ourselves, lots of acronyms. So this is just an introduction as to what we do. So you'll see on the slide our vision, our mission, and what we do. Our mission is to help Oregonians make informed decisions and maintain a resilient and affordable energy system. We advance solutions to shape an equitable, clean energy transition, protect the environment and public health, and responsibly balance energy needs and impacts for current and future generations. And then under what we do, you'll see the services that we provide and how we achieve our mission. The funding opportunity we're discussing today will help Odo support a resilient and affordable energy system, as well as a clean energy transition. Next slide, please. Okay, And then for those of you that are new to WebEx, there's a lot going on here. I'm sure you see. Here's a quick guide on how you can use some of the features. Attendees are going to be off camera and muted, but our host can unmute you if we can call on you to ask a question that might come up. And then you'll see the option to raise your hand on both the right-hand side of the screen under Participants panel. If you click near your name, there's also an option at the bottom of your screen where you can see a visual of a hand in the reactions bar. And feel free to use the chat function to ask questions or make comments, and just make sure that you send to all panelists or everyone so that all of the Odo staff can see it. We'll be taking turns, talking with you guys so we can all help respond if you have questions that come up. And then we'll try to get to as many of your questions in the chat or through raised hands, but we may not have time to get to all of them today, although we hope so. And then I see that maybe a few people have called in on the phone. You can press *6 to raise your hand and then *3 to unmute yourself when we call on you if you're on your phone, and the host will unmute you from our end. And then I just want to make sure that everybody knows that today's listening session is being recorded, and then the recording will be posted to our website later on this week, maybe tomorrow. Next slide, please. Okay, jumping right in. So we will talk about the home energy rebates collectively oftentimes, and I just want to make sure that it's understood that these are two separate but complementary grant programs that are available to Oregon from the U.S. Department of Energy, and you'll hear us call them USDOE. Oregon has to apply for these federal dollars through a grant application process, which includes laying out a plan for how to offer rebates to residents within the state for approved purposes. And these are two programs that are available to us from Congress, which passed the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, in 2022. It included lots of grants, tax incentives, and rebates. But you'll see here the HOMES program is the acronym for Home Efficiency Rebate Program. And this one is going to be more of a performance-based rebate for efficiency retrofits to homes that are existing. And then the HERE program is the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebate Program. This one is more for rebates for high efficiency electric appliances and certain upgrades that are associated with that. One thing that I just want to mention about the application process is that many of the program policies were laid out in the federal guidance, but many are left to the states to determine. And that's some of the things that Stephanie and Christina will talk to you a little bit more about later on. They'll give an overview of each of the programs, and then we'll ask you some questions later on for things that we still have yet to consider. One thing I also want to make clear is that we don't have these funds for these programs until the applications have been accepted, and Christina will go through a timeline later on about what we're looking forward to over the next several months and thereafter. So designing the programs takes a lot of careful planning, but we understand the excitement and the anticipation, and we're working hard to have our applications submitted and therefore have rebates available much sooner to all of you. The funding application is due to the U.S. Department of Energy by January 31st, 2025. Next slide, please. Okay, another thing I just want to call out is we have seen some confusion about rebates and tax credits, and just making clear that they are two different things. The IRA made both of these things available to the public. So unlike the home energy rebates, there's something called the Energy Efficient Home Improvement Credit. It's available right now through the IRS. So if you're filing your taxes right now, these tax credits are available, and you can apply for them as you file your taxes. Whereas the home energy rebates are going to be administered at the state level, not through the IRS. And so those rebates, we'll talk about how some of the details we're still sorting through, but some of the details we can share with how they might be administered later on. Here's a couple of bullets too about details on the tax credits. They can reduce your federal tax ode. The credits are up to $3,200. You'll file them, as I mentioned, with your tax return. They're available for your primary residence in most cases, and there's a few more details here, as well as some links. I'm hoping that maybe one of my colleagues might be able to drop some of these links in the chat for you all. Another thing I just want to mention is that Odo staff are not tax professionals, so just make sure that if you're interested in some of these tax credits, that you speak with a licensed tax professional about the tax credits. All right, next slide. All right, and then a few different bubbles here that you'll see. These are different programs that we're working on, and how the home energy rebates might align with the program goals that we have internally at the Oregon Department of Energy, and policies from several different complementary programs that are already existing or that we're currently working on. So as you know, we're talking about homes in here, the home energy rebates today. Those programs are going to be supported by the TREC program, which is going to be a workforce development program, as well as we have the opportunity to apply for an energy auditor training grant, which the TREC program, they're both workforce related. The TREC program is more for training energy contractors, and the energy auditor program is aimed at specifically energy auditors. The TREC program is a formula allocation that we will have coming to the state, which just means that as long as we follow the provisions and that we hit all the targets on the application, we should definitely see those funds coming our way. Whereas the Energy Auditor Training Grant, or EAT as we like to call it, is going to be competitive. So we're not guaranteed those funds, but hopefully both of those work together to sort of ramp up the training and the workforce that's going to be needed to deploy some of these rebates that we have coming our way as well. Other things that we have going on at the state are our heat pump programs. So we've got 2 state-funded heat pump programs. One is the Community Heat Pump Deployment Program, and that's implemented by regional partners. It's about $10 million in program offering incentives to support heat pump installations for homeowners. And then the other one is our Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program. That one is $15 million, and it's implemented by ODO, and it's supporting heat pump installations in rental homes. We also have been coordinating with other entities in our state, and we understand that there are lots of other existing rebate programs, and we have been working really hard to best understand how we can integrate these federal rebates into the existing landscape and fit it into the equation between the community-based organizations that have rebates available, utility programs, and our CAP agencies. Next slide, please. Okay, now just a little bit about the Justice 40 initiative. So the Justice 40 initiative was signed by President Biden on January 27th, 2021. And that was through Executive Order 14008, and it set forth some prioritizing actions to tackle the climate crisis. Included in that was the Justice 40 initiative, which directs that 40% of the benefits of many of these federal investments are going to flow to communities that are marginalized, underserved, and overburdened, excuse me. And so the home energy rebates falls under this program. We intend to follow through with the initiative. A couple of details on the Justice 40 initiative. The Council on Environmental Quality was tasked by the White House with defining these disadvantaged communities, and they used a number of data sets to show the communities that are most overburdened and underserved. Some of them are in some of these categories, such as fossil dependence, energy burden, environmental and climate hazards, and socioeconomic vulnerabilities. So some of the examples that they have included under these different data sets have been housing and energy costs, low income, lack of indoor plumbing, and wildfire risk. But those are just a few. I'd encourage you all, there's a link here. I hope somebody will drop in the chat to the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. This was the website that they created so that you can go to this website and look at different communities and see if they fall under that definition of Justice 40. And they're determined at the census tract level, which are going to be those small units of local geography. And then boundaries for statistical data is determined once every 10 years by the Census Bureau. I'm sure that many of you have gotten that call or have had to fill out that survey. But I also wanted to mention that lands that are within the boundaries of federally recognized tribes are also included on that map. All right, next slide, please. Perfect. So I just wanted to mention that we'll get into a lot of details of these different programs. I just want to mention, though, that the specific questions about projects is probably not going to be the right forum here today. If you do have questions that come up, you're welcome to send them in, and we're happy to talk with you about those. Christina and Stephanie, who are going to be talking in a moment, those are their email addresses. You're welcome to connect with them after this webinar. But right now I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie Cruz.
Thanks, Emily. We appreciate you setting up all of that background information for us. So starting with the homes program, this program is a performance-based energy efficiency program, and both single-family and multifamily households would be eligible for the program. Multifamily eligible through the building owner. The reason it's performance-based is that the energy savings for the project have to be demonstrated either before or after the project is completed. And we had the option or have the option to choose how to approach this program, either from a modeled approach where the energy savings are being estimated before the project proceeds, or a measured approach where the energy savings are actually calculated based on utility bill savings after the project is complete. And based on feedback that we've heard and resources available within the state, we are looking at using just the modeled approach for these programs, or for this program, pardon me. There are higher rebates available for households that save 35% of their annual energy use or more. And higher rebates are also available for those that are low income qualified. And the low income metric is 80% of the area median income. And then last piece on here is that the U.S. Department of Energy is requiring us to allow retroactivity for this program. So while projects that were initiated after the legislation passed August 16th, 2022 are allowable, those projects still have to meet all of the program requirements. And that is not fully defined at this point. So we are not able to assess whether or not retroactive projects are eligible at this time, but we are planning for that potential. And there's some guidance that USDOE released that outlines what the federal requirements are that won't be changing. And there may be aspects of the project requirements that we have control over, and anything that we have that needs to be updated will be communicated in advance of launching the programs. Let's see. Next slide, please. So what energy efficiency upgrades are eligible under this program? It's a pretty open-ended program. The metric for eligibility is really focused in on producing energy savings. And the energy savings are in energy, so either kilowatt hour therms, BTUs, not in dollars. Thank you for that question. And so they can include things that are focused in on like energy management and like occupational behavior, such as installing smart thermostats, so controlling for use, installing more efficient heating or cooling equipment like heat pumps, high efficiency condensing furnaces, new water heaters, or weatherization measures like air sealing, additional insulation, those types of things. Next slide, please. Shifting over to the HERE program. By contrast, this program is an income restricted point of sale rebate program. So the intention for this is for the eligibility to be determined in advance of the purchase of the new equipment or the initiation of the project, and then the rebate being applied to that point of sale purchase. Or that point of payment to the contractors, depending on what type of project it is. And high efficiency electric appliances associated upgrades, including air insulation and air sealing. And the income restricted means that there's both low income and moderate income categories in that qualification. So low income qualified would be less than 80% of the area median income. Moderate income would be in the range between 80 and 150% of the area median income. In this program, USDOE does not allow for retroactivity. And I did want to highlight that this is also eligible, multifamily homes as well as single family homes are also eligible for this program. Next slide, please. And Marcia, I think I'll have to get back to you on how frequently the AMI is updated. but it is based on the HUD, the Federal Housing and Urban Developments, AMI definitions. So we wanted to highlight that this program is been identified by the U.S. Department of Energy as an electrification program. So by accessing this program, the state of Oregon is engaging in electrification work. The program doesn't require removal of the existing systems, and it could support a dual fuel system, although like in the case of a heat pump installation, the heat pump would need to be the primary source of heat by the control setup. So next slide, please. Eligible measures under the HERE program are, as we kind of alluded to before, heat pumps for space heating or space cooling, heat pump water heaters, electric stove, cooktop range, ovens, a heat pump clothes dryer are all eligible pieces are eligible appliances or pieces of equipment. And then in addition, some building materials and their installation costs are eligible under the program, including electric load service center, insulation, air sealing, ventilation, and electrical wiring. So the way that the rebates in this program work, there's a maximum rebate of $14,000. So any measures under this on this list adding up to $14,000 could be eligible. For low income participants, the allowable costs are up to 100% of the project costs, but for moderate income participants, the allowable costs are only 50% of the project costs. So using a $8,000 heat pump, for example, hypothetically, a low-income participant could receive a rebate for the full cost of their heat pump, but a moderate-income participant would only receive half of the total cost. So their rebate would be capped at $4,000 unless they had additional measures that they did. But if the heat pump cost more money, say it was a $12,000 heat pump, then a low-income participant could have up to $8,000 for their heat pump again, and the moderate income could have half of the total project cost, so $6,000. And it looks like we have several questions.
Yeah, I can go ahead and just ask them if you want, Steph. I was just going to interrupt.
Sure, that's great.
Take that on. So we had several questions come in. We did get an answer on the AMI question, which is that according to our federal grants officer, she believes it's annually and updated every federal fiscal year beginning on October 1st. And then we have a question, will ODO be doing program and project evaluation? John Karasaki is interested if there will be actual savings met or bettered model savings. For example, do tankless water heaters save energy, or does use go up as hot water never runs out? Any thoughts on that?
Yes, so program evaluation is required as part of the US DOE's program requirements. We are still working on the details of how that is going to work, but we expect that there will be program evaluation and outcomes coming out of this, and there's a regular rate of evaluation, so it won't just be at the very end of the project. I believe that we have to do some of that work as we go through the program.
Great. And then Marcia wants to know, are tankless all gas heated? I think the answer is no. Yeah, there's tankless can be electric heated too. And then Neil wonders, will the federal tax credits be available for any amounts not covered by the rebates?
So the tax credits are stackable with these programs. However, these programs both have some income qualified components. So if you have a tax burden, then you may be eligible for both a tax credit and the Homes or HERE program. If you meet the income qualifications for HERE, the Homes program has a portion of the funds set aside for low income, and then the remainder is unrestricted. So that's the space where you're more likely to have stacking of funding between the Homes program and the tax credits.
And then the next question is one that I think we're going to get to a little bit more later, and I'll ask if we want to punt and wait, which is just when will both rebates be available? I think we're going to get there-ish. It's a lot of not just up to us, so we can't give a definite answer, but we'll get there in a sec. Do here upgrades have to be done by qualified contractors, or can they be owner installed?
Some of the measures on the list can be done by the owner, and some of them I believe will need to be go through qualified contractors. We are still working through all the details on that, so I don't have a fully definitive answer, but there are some aspects that typically require a contractor or somebody with a license to do the work.
Okay. There's some talk about tankless gas heaters that folks can look at the chat if they want to see that. And then there's a discussion of how the area median income is released annually, but the data used in the final update, there's a lag. There's a good solid paragraph if somebody wanted to read that in the chat, and a little more on AMI. And then Lisa wants to know, can the product rebates buy down the cost through the contractor?
So we're still finalizing the details on what stage in the process of getting a project done the rebate comes into play. So the intention is, yes, that the ultimate program participant would not be paying out of pocket in the HERE program the cost of the rebate and then being reimbursed, but that it would happen somewhere up the chain before that participant is paying their portion. So that's the point of sale rebate intention in that program. The homes program, I think there's a little bit more flexibility on it, but we're still intending to try to prevent the homeowner from having to front the cost and then be reimbursed by applying the rebate earlier up in the supply chain.
Great. The next one is just verifying that 100% of the homes program will be modeled and there will not be a measured approach.
So yes, that is one of the decision points that we are working on based on feedback that we've received and available resources in the state. To do the measured approach, USDOE is looking for 12 months of utility data after a project is complete to verify the savings, and the state is not in a position to carry the risk in that scenario, but and there's a role for like an aggregator to step in and to do projects and carry the risk for not achieving savings, but we haven't heard from anybody who's interested in taking on that role in the state. So we foresee that the modeled approach is the best option for Oregon.
Let's see. So Chris says, please don't punt. I'm not sure what he's talking about, or she, but you can put more in there if you want me to know what you were talking about there. And then
I think that's in relation to the timeline. So we do have a slide kind of laying out what the next steps are and what the timeline
it's not punting
looks like.
Yeah, it's not punting for like another time. It's just like we have more slides to do. People just had a lot of questions in the chat, so I just thought I'd start to take them, but they just keep coming. Do we want to keep going through slides and come back to some of these, or get through them? Because they keep coming, which is great. We want to hear these questions, but just curious if some of the questions might get answered by the slides ahead.
No, I think most anything that's in the details of how the programs are going to work, I think we should try to address now.
Okay, great.
For like
How
the
will
basic
how will income be verified?
That one we are still finalizing the details for. USDOE does allow us to use participation in other programs as a method of verification. So that's one of the ways that we plan to use for program verification. If somebody is already participating in an income qualified program that matches our requirements, we can refer to that program's income qualification instead of doing our own. We also can do documentation-based income verification. And then USDOE does allow for additional methods, including self-attestation and we are evaluating the risks and the ability to go through and offer those. We've heard very strongly from our stakeholders that that's a desired mechanism for income verification, and so we're still working through the details of how that can work in Oregon, and trying to make that happen.
And how it can work in Oregon and fit within the federal parameters in which they're allowing us to use self-attestation and the limitations that they have applied on that. I guess might be fair to say too. So definitely trying to figure out how to thread a needle. So now we've got a rumor one. Rumor is that these two programs will follow the contractor delivery structure. It's not really a question, but do we want to address the rumor?
Stay tuned. Just a couple more minutes.
All right. Tom's wondering, how a client switch from gas furnace to a heat pump? This program is not retroactive, or should she have her tax person look into it? I don't know that a tax person will be able to answer on the rebate side, and retroactivity. I'll let maybe Steph. Why don't you go ahead? I'm scared I'll say the wrong thing.
I can grab the link to the US DOE checklist for retroactive projects, which might be a good starting point. As I mentioned, we don't have all of our program details finalized, and we won't for a little while longer. Where it might make sense for us to, before we dive too far into the like when a retroactive project could apply, we'll look at the timeline slide and show you where we're at and what our approximate dates look like. But that's a good starting point. I will dig up that link for you and share it so that you can at least look at projects that are potentially eligible for retroactivity and make sure, make a determination of whether they're likely to be eligible or whether you're better off pursuing tax credits and other options for a project in the meantime.
Let's see. Does AMI change with the number of family members in a household? Emily, do you know that one?
Yeah.
I'm seeing yes from somebody else, but maybe we could provide more information in the chat on that one. So that you can see how it works, Robert. I'll see if we can find some more. It's adjusted by household size, so we'll get you some info there if it's helpful to see something. We have a question from John about the rental home heat pump program. I'm going to see if I can find an answer and have that ready to go for later. But the question is, have we calculated what the average days to pay installers is after an installation has been reported to us? So I can find that out potentially. Garrett wants to know if there's an existing equipment requirement. For example, the home has a heat pump and they're not converting from electric resistance, but simply upgrading, or has added a ductless heat pump in the past and is adding more or another.
So the homes program is really focused on the outcome of estimated energy savings. So if those projects in combination meet the minimum energy savings threshold requirements, they would potentially be eligible for the homes program. And then the HERE program is based on what's being installed, and it's not tied to an existing equipment requirement. So it would also likely be eligible under that program.
Okay, perfect. And then I'm now seeing that somebody already put a link to look up more details on AMI in the chat. So somebody can do that if they want to know more about households. Can you offer details on modeling software yet?
So I can tell you what the federal requirements for energy modeling are. Actually in the legislation in the Inflation Reduction Act, they reference the BPI 2400 standard as the methods for doing energy modeling for the program. So any software that we allow needs to be able to meet those minimum requirements. And USDOE has been in the process of evaluating programs to ensure that they do comply, and has a list on their website of software that is confirmed to be allowable for the program. And we don't intend to restrict the software to like a single type. We would be intending to allow the use of any software that USDOE deems eligible.
Great. Karna, thank you for thanking us for taking questions. You're welcome. And the measures that we're seeing on the screen right now that we've now had people look at for a while, she's just wondering if we plan on making, if we believe that those will be available here in Oregon. Are these the measures that Oregon will offer?
Yeah, so we don't intend to reduce the number of measures that are eligible for the HERE program, although that is an option that some states can take.
Okay. We got another question about timeline, which we're going to get to in a second. Somebody wanted to know if we could show the homes rebate slide. Our slides will be available on our program website. So I will put that into the chat when I'm next done talking. And then, so you can look at the whole slide deck if you'd like. And then Doug wants folks to know tax rebates are only available for the year in which equipment is placed in service. I think tax credits is the right word there. So only for the year in which equipment is placed in service. And let's see, CAP weatherization programs based on DOE standards often include occupant comfort as a goal of efficiency upgrades. Does that not apply to homes and HERE upgrades?
So there are considerations that can be included. What we've been presenting so far has been mainly what are the USDOE minimum requirements for the programs. And we have been looking at whether and which additional requirements we need to include as part of the programs. There is a strong push to ensure that projects that are undertaken under these programs actually result in utility bill savings in addition to energy savings for the occupants of the homes, as well as consideration for other factors like occupant comfort or other benefits to the household that are important, like improved health outcomes by having a house that's heated properly and isn't growing mold, those kind of additional considerations. But they aren't part of the kind of minimum outline that USDOE has provided for the programs.
Great. And let's see. So what will the I kind of feel like we just maybe answered this, but it got asked maybe while we were answering it. What will the qualifications for the energy modelers be? I think
so it's going to follow that BPI
Yeah.
2400 standard.
And it's like a software. It's not like different types
There
of contractors
is-
can use that software versus there being like a professional.
There is, I believe, some minimum amount of training and/or experience that's required. And we can kind of highlight that there's the additional workforce development funding, and we intend to make sure that some of that funding is made available to help support people who want to become energy modelers to help participate in the homes program. So it's our goal that that funding will help support participation and the ability of contractors or other energy professionals to step in and do the type of work that's needed.
Great. All right, we have one last question for now, and then even if other ones come in, I'm gonna just wait from here. So this one is, are there requirements for appliances to be installed at the same time as the electric upgrades? And then, one real quick thing while you marinate on that, we realized that we don't have the slides posted yet because we were still finalizing them. So they'll be posted hopefully pretty quickly, but if they're not there right now, when you go to look back at the slides, just know they'll be there soon. And then back to appliances installed at the same time as upgrades, yes or no?
So the HERE program is a cap on projects. So the projects could be done separately within that space, but the eligibility, I believe, for the electric work is that it's tied to some appliance. So if the timing was staggered for other reasons, it could all still be eligible. It would just all need to be part of a related upgrade. And then for the homes program, there is some provision for related costs to be included in those, but the rebate caps for that program vary from by the federal standard from $2,000 to $8,000. So it may not cover some of those additional expenses the same way that the HERE program specifically covers them.
Great. All right, well, that was great. Thanks for the questions in the chat. When we get to questions in the future, which is coming up later in comments, folks can also raise their hands so they can verbally participate. But with that, I'll turn things back over.
Hi there. Will, can I get the next slide, please? Oh, you got it. Hi, I'm Christina Donnelly. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Senior Incentives Analyst working on the Homes and HERE programs. I can't see the chat, so if any clarifying questions come in, please interrupt me, Christy. So at our previous webinars, we had asked several questions about the program's potential design. And so we wanted to give you an update about how this and other feedback that we've received have influenced our current plans. So we heard about the need to ensure that rebates cover as much of the project costs as possible for low-income households. So for the homes program, we're proposing to increase the rebate cap for low-income customers from $8,000 to $10,000 per project, and increase the rebate limit for low-income customers from 80% of project costs to 100% of project costs. In addition, for the HERE program, we're proposing to increase the overall low-income allocation from 40% to 60% of total available rebates, and to increase the overall allocation for multifamily households from 10% to 20%. At the previous webinar, we also talked about retroactivity, but as Stephanie noted, and we talked a bit about, USDOE has issued guidance that the homes rebates must be available to projects initiated after August 16th, 2022, but all projects must still meet all of our program requirements, including the requirements for the home assessment and modeling the expected energy savings. We've also heard feedback that we should make the minimum efficiency standards consistent between the two programs. So we plan to match the Energy Star certification requirements where applicable, while allowing for local programs to set higher standards where funds may be braided together. For heat pumps, we will also require AHRI certificates to ensure that the efficiency minimums are met. In addition, we also know that the Portland Clean Energy Fund is well resourced at the moment. And so in Portland, we plan to prioritize multifamily households and disadvantaged communities that have been identified by the Justice 40 initiative, which Emily talked a bit about earlier. So next slide, please. So we would also like to provide an update for our proposed implementation strategy. So basically, how do we plan to build out the essential components of the program and then administer them once they are up and running? So we are planning to issue an RFP to hire a contractor to build some of our systems that we need to operate the programs, including the rebate processing and management system. We're still developing the expected scope of work for that RFP, and we'll be sure to make a public announcement about it when it's released. We also plan to work with two entities, which the application and we're referring to as implementers, who will issue rebates to applicants. Odo plans to issue an RFP to find an implementer for customers in consumer-owned utility and Idaho Power service areas. And then in investor-owned utility service areas, we're planning to issue rebates through the Energy Trust of Oregon, which is an independent nonprofit organization charged by the Oregon Public Utilities Commission to administer ratepayer-funded energy efficiency and renewable energy programs in the state of Oregon in investor-owned utility service areas. We think that this implementation structure is going to help us learn from and take advantage of ETO's existing experience administering these kinds of programs, while also helping us launch the programs as quickly and effectively as possible. Other states, such as Maine, who also have a statewide utility program administrator, are using a similar structure to implement these programs in their state as well. Once the programs launch, Odo will continue to work in close collaboration with our implementers to ensure that the programs are running efficiently and that we continue to meet all of our program requirements and goals. So next slide, please. So we wanted to give you an idea of our overall timeline. Although the projected dates to begin issuing rebates is still uncertain, we wanted to share with you some of the major milestones that we're going to have to pass along the way. So right now, Odo is developing the first part of our application to USDOE, which is due, as Emily said, in January of 2025. though we intend to submit at the end of this month. While we wait for USDOE to review and approve that submission, we're going to continue to develop a lot of the details that we've been discussing today through what USDOE is calling the implementation blueprint. This is going to describe how the programs will actually operate, all of the nitty-gritty details, who will do what, all of that. So once we are close to finalizing that plan, we'll schedule and host another public webinar to share more of the details about the proposed technical requirements and how different entities will apply for and receive rebates for both programs. As we develop these final plans, we're going to be working simultaneously to issue the RFP to bring on an entity to issue rebates in COU and Idaho Power service areas, and to finalize and formalize our proposed relationship with ETO to issue rebates to customers in IOU service areas. Another big step in the process is developing or procuring the systems that we need to operate the programs. As I mentioned, this includes everything from the rebate reservation and processing system to systems for income verification, systems for data collection, management, validation, contractor training, education, outreach, installation procedures, project auditing, program auditing, processes for home assessments, and energy modeling, and more. As stated previously, Odo plans to issue an RFP to find a contractor to help us build these systems. And so once that work is completed and USDOE has approved our implementation plan and we have all of our systems built out, our implementers will be able to begin issuing rebates to customers. So we have a lot to do before Homes in Here are ready for prime time. We've been pursuing an aggressive timeline to try to begin issuing rebates as quickly as possible, with a goal of beginning to issue rebates under the HERE program by late 2024. However, it is likely that the earliest rollout dates, especially for the Homes program, are probably not going to be until early 2025. So as you can see, these programs have a lot of complex components and requirements, and we can't really accurately predict how things will shake out. And most of these tasks have to happen in a very specific order and are subject to both USDOE and other state approvals that have timelines that we at Odo just don't control. So, but regardless of the time frame, we're going to continue to provide updates through our listserv, on our website, and on the program's frequently asked questions document. And yeah, we're going to be working hard to ensure that everybody who's interested in participating is going to be well prepared before we launch. So if there are no questions, I will turn it over to Christy Splitt, our Government Relations Coordinator, but I suspect there might be questions.
There might be, but I think what I'll do is just do my one slide and then we'll be into Q&A anyway. So let's just do that.
Okay. Christy Splitt, everybody.
Hi, I'm Christy. I already talked without introducing myself. I'm our Government Relations Coordinator, but I also do a fair amount of other work at the agency, including working as one of the team members here on the Home Energy Rebates team. And I'm really excited because when we turn in the application later this month for the Homes in Here program, I will be turning my attention to, or actually even sooner, turning my attention to the one-stop shop. And many of you may remember that in House Bill 3630, the agency was directed to create a single resource to provide interested persons information, technical assistance, and assistance in identifying contractors and financing options related to available energy efficiency incentives and programs. So it's not just about Homes in Here, but broadly about the types of programs that could provide increased energy efficiency for homes. And that includes those programs, but also lots of other programs too. This all kind of rose from realizing that there are a lot of programs that can be kind of braided or put together, as we've talked about today, in order to create a maximum benefit for folks that are looking to make these upgrades. So with all of that said, I just wanted to make sure that folks knew we were still working on that it's still on our radar. Our goal is to have this single resource, which we view as a website to start with, and hope over time to build out into something more. So we'll be working on that starting now. We just hired the staff member that we have to help us with the IT part of this work. So anyway, more to come on this, but just didn't want people to think we'd forgotten about it or that we weren't working on it. In fact, we are and are getting ready to really get down to it. So expect there will probably be a chance for folks to gather to help us build the best one-stop shop we can for the state of Oregon in the near future. And with that, we can go to the next slide. Thanks, Phil. So really, we already have heard a lot of questions from you all. We also are totally open to comments. Like I said before, you can raise your hand if you want to talk to us. That's great. If you want to go in the chat, that's fine too. It's just a little bit more exciting for me. And then we can go to the next slide and just some questions to sort of like frame up our conversation. What else do you want to hear from us? What other questions do you still have? And what else do you think we need to consider as we finalize the design of these programs? Really, we didn't want to have us turn our application in later this month without another chance to hear from you all and talk with you about our plans. But as you heard, we'll do another conversation too down the road as the details get sorted. So we already had some questions in the chat. As I mentioned, I would kind of ask Neil's last question and then move on. So we have a question from Gregory. Could funding for these programs be cut by a future Congress? Emily, you're...
Yeah, I'll jump in here. This is a fun one. Yeah, you know, we never know what the political landscape is going to look like, you know, months from now, and what Congress will choose to do. You know, what they did with the IRAs, they budgeted these funds to the U.S. Department of Energy, and once they're budgeted, then through the process of applying and negotiating an assistance agreement with the Department of Energy is how they'll be legally committed to us. So once they're obligated to us, it's kind of a legally binding agreement, and I think that it would be very, very hard for them to claw them back. But that's again another reason why we are really trying to be on the fast track, and one of the very first states to be applying for both the Homes and the HERE program at the end of this month, because once we have those agreements in place, I think that it'll be much more difficult for the funds to be clawed back. I hope that helps.
Great, thanks, Emily. Charity wanted to know when we mentioned Justice 40 communities in Portland, do you mean Justice 40 census tracts? And yes, that's the way that the Justice 40 map works. And then let's see, unless somebody else disagrees with me, I think that's an easy one. Alex wants to know, is it not in the statute that it cannot exceed 80% cost for homes program? And is Oregon planning to supplement to close that gap?
Yeah, I can answer that question. So yes, the federal outline initially limited the homes program to 80% of the project costs for low income, but it does include an opportunity for the state to increase that for the low income participants only. So we are proposing that we do increase that to allow for project costs up to 100%. For the homes program, acknowledging that even bumping the cap up to 10,000 is unlikely to cover the full cost of the projects, but we are actively working on braiding programs together to deliver projects, especially in the low income space, to ensure that the maximum benefit is being offered to those that couldn't otherwise afford the upgrades.
Let's see. For other energy programs, P. Munson has seen that the contractor costs. I'm sorry if you guys can hear crying. My kids came home and wanted to see me, and I closed the door, and now one of them is like moaning outside. I'm hoping that WebEx is like keeping it down. Anyway, for other energy programs, I've seen that the contractor costs have increased when the rebates are included. How do we make sure that they don't do this here? I understand some increase due to modeling requirements.
That is one issue that's been identified in the application that is something that we're going to have to monitor and consider as we implement these programs. So we will be coming up with a plan for that.
Okay. What does implementer mean? Are they going to issue actual funds or program manage? And what is their capacity or limits?
Yeah, so we're still hammering out all of the details for our implementers, but the idea is the implementers would broadly be responsible for reviewing and approving projects and issuing actual funds. The extent to which they're managing the programs, all of that is going to be ironed out as we make those agreements.
Okay. Let's see. But I do think the general vision is like that's who you would go to. Mm-hmm. For the program, for what it's worth. I think that may be helpful, just frame of reference. They'd be the ones writing the checks, I think is what we imagine, right?
I think we envision a centralized location for people to go, but but who would be managing your project would be depending on where the project was located.
Right. Okay. And then the next question from Teresa in Lane County. which is doing tons of great efficiency work. I see it in our rental home heat pump results. Good job down there. Is there a maximum amount of rebates? And is there a max amount of funding that needs to be spent by the end of the IRA timeline? I think we have to spend all the money by the end of the timeline, right? That might be a good question for Emily. But is there a maximum amount of rebates is the question, I guess. I don't know. I'm
Yeah, so
wondering.
each program has been, for Oregon, has been allocated, I think, $56 million. So, and then 20% of that is reserved for administrative costs. So the balance is what is the maximum, is going to be the maximum amount that's available for these programs as of now.
And
Hopefully
it
that-
looks, yeah, based on our rough timeline for launching, it looks like the programs will run for up to 8 years. And all of the funds will need to be expended during that time.
I have a comment that says, yeah, like the EV rollout, but I'm not exactly sure what that comment is meant to modify. Sorry. But if Ben wants to weigh in further, he can raise his hand maybe. Tim has a question. If a household is at 81% AMI, they receive only 50% of HERE rebate amounts. Difficult to retrofit then for those households. Any thought to step up that percentage, such as 81 to 120% AMI, to get 75% of a rebate amount, 121 to 150 equals 50% of rebate amount, for example?
Yeah, so unfortunately, we don't have the latitude to make that determination for the program. USDOE only allowed us to adjust the percentages that they set for the low income, less than 80% category.
And then next up is, are you considering policies to avoid displacement, especially in terms of upgrades to multifamily properties?
Yeah, so one of the rules of the program is that landlords, I don't remember the specific wording, but landlords are going to be required to have a clause in the contract that says that they are not able to evict tenants within 2 years of the program of installing the heat pump.
Okay. This is, I think, a quick one. What AMI will you be using? City, county, area? State.
I believe it's county.
Okay. And how do HERE income, let's see, question about HERE income eligibility for rental properties.
I can take that one. So in order for a multifamily building to be eligible under the HERE program, at least, or under the programs in general, because it works for both, 50% or more of the units need to be occupied by people who are meet the income qualification requirements. So whether that's the low or moderate income for, or the low income for HERE and homes program, I believe, is the focus. Sorry, I misspoke there. And so then the eligibility, if the owner wanted to upgrade, for example, all of their properties, the allowable rebates are based on a per unit rebate. So they would be eligible for the rebate based on the percentage of the units in their property that are meeting the low income requirements.
Okay, hopefully that helps, Neil. Robert wants to know, what do you mean when you say multifamily building will be prioritized in the Portland area? I think you mean in Portland, or maybe, but go ahead on that one. What do you mean when you say that will be prioritized? Multifamily buildings.
So the low income multifamily, I believe, is what we meant by that. So, and I think it maybe also alludes to Charity's previous question about the prioritization in Portland. So right now we are at the stage of figuring out how we are dividing the funding between the two service areas and the two implementers. So one of the factors that we're taking into consideration is that desire to prioritize the low income multifamily housing, low income in general, and then the CGS requirements in the Portland area.
Yeah, and then Justice 40 requirements. And for anybody who, I think we put the map in earlier in the chat, you can also just look up J40 map and Justice 40 map, and I think you'll find it, but a lot of the Portland area does not fall into that category. So that's what we're talking about there with the issue of needing to prioritize spending money outside of those non-Justice 40 areas, if that makes sense. We just accidentally answered a question that comes later, so that's exciting. We have just a couple minutes left, 1 minute left. So I'm trying to think how to handle some of these. There's a question about adding a smart thermostat element. I don't think there's a requirement there. So I don't think we're planning to do anything with that unless anybody wants to correct me. We already talked about the breakdown of funding between IOU and the consumer-owned utilities. Asking about coming up with a way to keep funds regularly flowing, given that we just went through a bunch of money for heat pumps with renters really fast. Definitely something we're working on and trying to figure out how to do that so that it's doesn't just dry up really fast, I guess. And then, oh gosh, there's no way I can get through all these questions. I don't know. How do we want to handle it? I can stay a little bit longer if other folks can, but I don't know if the folks that need to answer the questions can stay a few extra minutes.
I can stay for a little while. I don't have anything scheduled after this today.
Okay.
Same.
Okay, cool. All right, we'll keep going. If you have to go, you have to go, but we'll try to get through these questions. And we're glad you have a lot of good questions, but sorry, we didn't realize we'd have quite this many. So Charity's wondering about CBOs directly accessing these funds. Again, I think this is something we're hoping our implementers can work on, but her question is, if these are administered by ETO, just like any other ETO incentive reimbursement, these funds will have a lot of trouble reaching low-income households. So it's more of a comment, but I think it's something we're really interested in, is how we can kind of change that dynamic. Is that a fair answer? Trying to be quick here.
And Energy Trust is also interested in that as well, which is part of the considerations that went into us deciding to include them as a subrecipient.
And then Doug's saying it would require legislation to claw back the funds, which I think is true. Somebody's asking if Washington and California are moving forward in a similar fashion. And I think in some ways, yes, in some ways, no. We're unique in that we're doing two, like a investor-owned utilities and a Idaho Power and consumer-owned utilities type of strategy, given the different desires and interests in those communities. So I know that's different, but I know they're also planning to work with implementers, right? Anything else we want to add to that? Okay. We have a very specific question about his own situation from David Jameson. And David, we put in the chat the email addresses to reach out to program staff, and they can maybe help with your specific situation. I don't know what this is. How will ECHO electric funds and gas utility low income energy efficiency funds be braided? Does anyone know about ECHO? No.
I'm not familiar with that program off the top of my head, but if the funding that you're looking at braiding together with these federal funds are ratepayer dollars, then they're definitely allowed to be braided together with these funds to support energy efficiency projects.
And I see you have a question. I'm going to get to you in a second. Let's see. David Heslem, hi David, is wondering if we plan to submit a market transformation plan with the implementation plan, which I think is our goal, or very close together. Is that right?
I don't think we have planned to submit them simultaneously, but the market transformation plan is due within a year of us standing up the program. You're right, funding, the balance of funding is going to be dependent on us receiving an approved plan. We do hope to submit it as soon after the program starts, as soon as possible, but yeah, it is due within 1 year. after.
Yeah, I think our
see that.
overall goal is to get the program started as soon as possible, because we've heard that loud and clear that people want to see that happen. And that might mean that, and that might also help us with the like spreading out of the funds question that came before. So anyway, any lessons learned from our friends who have already filled out sent in their applications? It says filed their programs. I think they've just turned in their applications so far. So those programs are not up and running. So we don't have lessons learned yet from them on that. I believe we have been able to sometimes like kind of see some of the things that they did in their application, right, to help inform the application.
Another thing that I'll just jump in and say is that those states only submitted their applications for here. So we may be one of the first states to submit both homes and here.
Yeah, because we are planning to submit both at the same time. Federal HERE money is a limited sum. The only way it would expand if oversubscribed is if there was another piece of legislation adding funds to the program. Do you plan to include working with retailers for point of sale rebates for HERE?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Somebody was asking about like, how do we help make sure they get a retroactive rebate? In the chat above, if you look for it, there's a checklist that that USDOE put together to help people understand how retroactivity works. The way that it has to work is all of our criteria have to be met. We don't yet know all the criteria that we're going to have. So we think just pretty risky to guarantee retroactivity to anyone. But generally speaking, it's possible if in the end we put our program together and you have clients or whoever that did do everything, did meet those criteria, then they could be eligible for retroactivity. Hopefully that's a fair answer. And I'm just trying to be fast, so people please like weigh in, grab me, and answer if you don't like what I'm saying. Do we have any details about how contractors will be placed on the qualified contractor list?
I think we're hoping to take advantage of some existing qualified contractor lists that are operated by both ODO and ETO. We're still determining whether or not all the requirements match and how we can make that as streamlined as possible. But it will require an application by a contractor if a co-qualification isn't available.
Yeah, and I was just going to note that that's one of the things that we will roll out before we are issuing rebates. So we want to give the contractors some lead time to get up to speed, to make sure that they have all the information they need to help their customers participate in the programs.
Okay, so let's see. What will the heat pump efficiencies be that we're requiring? Do we know that yet?
So we have been talking with other implementers across the state, trying to figure out what the right place to land is. And it sounds like from those conversations that we will be adhering to the Energy Star certification minimum standard for heat pumps in the programs. Although, especially in the homes program where we're looking for high energy savings, a higher efficiency will likely make it more likely that your project would be eligible.
Okay. Tim has maybe more of a comment on us, just asking about, I think we already said we don't yet have the policy designed for limiting displacement. So I'm going to take this as a comment that he's wondering about limits to raising rent for 2 years after a retrofit, for example.
Consumer protection piece of the implementation blueprint that we will be finalizing before we submit that. So we have more to report on that before the implementation blueprint is submitted.
I can drop in the chat a little screenshot that I took of the application, how it sort of describes this, since I didn't do a great job of it before. You can see sort of what we're going to be using to design this aspect of the program.
Doug Piper is sharing that California is planning to restrict homes to low income in the initial years. Lisa McGarity, maybe she's saying that ECHO is ratepayer dollars from her question a while ago about braiding those incentives. I think I'll just quickly say, like, we're planning on figuring out how to braid all the various different programs together the best that we can, and we might not have specific answers right now about how exactly that's going to work. but just know we've been meeting with lots of folks that run energy efficiency programs around the state to figure out how to make that all work. Oh goodness, Jessica's got a complicated one with a lot of acronyms. Do people know what WX means? Is that weatherization maybe? Okay. So if a household is at or below 200% of the federal poverty limit, it would be in their best interest to work with their local LIWAP program and low income weatherization assistance program. Is that right? And which would provide whole home weatherization, I think, and likely a heat pump as well. Getting a heat pump installed would possibly preclude them from a whole home weatherization, which I think this has already been fixed, right? Or no? But is there any mechanism to route low income folks to their local LIWAP program first?
Yeah, so we are definitely planning on working in coordination with the local low-income weatherization programs. It's not our intention to set a project up to make them ineligible for additional assistance. The goal would be to have the programs either go in the order that makes the most sense or to be processed together so that they could take advantage of the rated funding and help us extend both programs' resources further.
Okay, and then
we're still working on the details, I guess, is the.
Will order of operations be required? In other words, will you require that envelopes be updated to some minimum level before other improvements to maximize benefit?
We've been talking about requiring, like for the homes program specifically, that weatherization and similar upgrade be considered in the energy model that's done to determine whether or not they're needed to support the remaining energy efficiency upgrades. And we're still figuring out how that works with the point of sale rebate intention in the HERE program. But it is definitely our intention that we are not just installing heat pumps in homes that don't have envelopes that would support energy savings. That can definitely drive up costs if you wind up relying on lack of heat, electric resistance in the heat pump in that situation. So working on the consumer protection requirements around that and the quality assurance requirements to make sure that projects are successful.
Okay. Lisa McGarity, do people know where Lisa works, or maybe we have her email address, we can follow up with her. She wants to talk about braiding wherever she works, their low income energy efficiency. Oh, I guess maybe natural gas provider for their ratepayer funds that are separate from ETO. So just we'll get in touch, Lisa. And then I think that's the end of the questions. Charity, I see you're still on, and I think we're gonna separately reach out to you. But if somebody wants to weigh in, they're welcome to. But I think we just want to, you can either come off mute if you want and we can talk or not, but we just wanted to, if we need to clarify further sort of what we're thinking about how to deal with the Justice 40 stuff in Portland.
Yeah, I don't think we're setting requirements for who has to be what to participate in the program in the Portland metro area. Right now, we're really trying to figure out that funding calculation of what funds go in which direction. And we're weighing factors like the population of the service areas, the other factors like remoteness and cost of doing projects, as well as heating and cooling needs in those spaces. So it's a little bit of a complex calculation. And then that Justice 40 and low income prioritization in the Portland area is kind of one of the ways we can consider focusing on high needs in that space, kind of while still considering all those other factors across the whole state. So I don't think we're intending to specifically exclude portions of the Portland Metro, but we're trying to figure out how to allocate dollars in a way that makes sense. We're still working on what that calculation is going to be exactly, but those are the factors that we're considering.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, Ben Gorman saying nice things, thank you. Lisa put her email address in the chat. I'm cutting and pasting it out. And then one last thing is, it looks like Marcia, and we can also get your email address from the sign in. She is also having an issue that's personal to her house. So either she can reach out to us or we can find her. And I will leave. Oh, next follow-up webinar, Bill. We're planning on holding a webinar. We're going to turn our application in a couple of weeks, which is sort of a bare bones application. And then you put together this much meatier implementation blueprint. And we will be working to put that together as quickly as we can and get it submitted as quickly as we can after we get the application in. And so our plan is to have another webinar similar to this one around the same time the blueprint goes in, just like we did with this one, around the same time as our application will go in. Hopefully that sounds reasonable, but it's a little nebulous right now. Summer? Is that fair? Great.
That's a good ballpark.
Cool. All right. Well, hey, Bill likes it. Okay. Well, thanks everyone who stayed late. Over about like half our attendees stayed and listened in, which is really lovely. And Marcia, we're going to follow up with you because your situation is like specific to your project. And with that, I'm super late to a meeting, so I'm going to and we really appreciate everyone's comments and thoughts and care, and really looking forward to working together and making all of this stuff hopefully come together and work out as well as possible for Oregonians.
Thanks, everybody.